Hello, how are you doing? This was supposed to happen at least a year ago. The 40th anniversary was 40 years ago, and we'd some work prepared and it just couldn't happen, you know. So finally we're crawling back here without energy, but with intent. And the thing for us to want to remember, because of Seamus Dean's death this year, you know, is to remember just what a significant figure he was, you know, of course to Derry, of course to Field Day, but he was a huge figure in his own right. Extraordinary intellect. I first heard about him from Stuart Parker, the playwright, who said, come here, there's an absolutely brilliant article it was in this oxymoronic quarterly called The Honest Ulsterman. And he had written a thing about, it was called Towards an Irish Intelligentsia. And this was when he was quite young, and we were all quite young, but he, that was his intention, you know, was to create an intellectual world. And he became, of course, as we know, incredibly well known in the academic world, but he got less and less comfortable in the academy because there was a lot of suspicion of him. In fact, an academic guy said to me once, Seamus Dean has an agenda. And I said, no, he doesn't have an agenda, he has ideas. And that's all he wanted to do. And he wanted to get, and then with Field Day, he became entirely comfortable because we just let him do whatever he wanted. How could we stop him? We weren't smart enough. But he was unbelievable. He created the anthology, created the pamphlets, and eventually, and the Field Day Review, which went on for years and years, a beautifully presented Field Day Review, and then in a defiant way, I created the Seamus Dean Lecture, and he was just about grateful, you know. But I totally adored him. He was a funny man. He took nothing to do with the theatre except odd little decisions. But I remember once there was an idea presented to the theatre crew about James Simmons wanted to write an Ulster Scots version of the Bacchae. And Dean immediately said, oh, Cully Bacchae. As fast as you like, you know. It was just totally great. So then there was this, so that's it. Thanks for everything, Seamus. And so this year we made a bit of a film that was written by Clare Dwyer Hogg and directed by Juliet. Oh, Riddell. What? Riddell. I'm so sorry. I had too much to drink last night. I did. What? Yeah. Why is this so bad, is it? Anyway, oh, and I'd just like to remember a couple of people who were very important to Field Day who also died in recent times. Foyle Megan, the painter, a year today, actually. And a bit before that, actually, of all the plays that we ever did, Dean loved the Sam Shepard play. He didn't like the Irish plays, you know. And I know that Eamon McCann liked the Sam Shepard play, and Sam died a few years ago. So I'm remembering them as well. But then the film with Juliet Riddell as director and Clare Dwyer Hogg. So we did do a film that was online about the border, and it had huge coverage, didn't it? And interest. And so anyway, these girls made a film called Stay Alive, which is about the high incidence of suicide, not only in Derry, but certainly in Derry.
If your glory is turned to dust, and all about you the wind kicks it up, this is for you. This is a lament for what you see, a war cry for new reality.
Can't you see past this moment? Maybe you're blinded by brick shaped like air, a horrible trick telling you nothing is there.
Perhaps the air you can't bear to breathe is not air at all. Is your mouth on concrete as your eyeball is to wall?
You know, air is supposed to bring life. Breathe in, lungs fill. Exhale, trees drink. Air is space. Forgive this simplicity. Isn't space the grace to move through the intangible and touch actuality?
So what demon is it that carves from hell, saws from Hades a wall, and in it places a door to absence, makes it seem like air, like any other air, except you are the failure for getting there, becoming stuck, not pushing through.
What mocks you? Mimics a way into freedom by closing down all roots? What poisons your green shoots nestled in the soil, waiting for their season? What commits this treason?
It starts with the mind, because the body wants to live.
You know death comes to us all. But to fall headlong in there, shoved by despair, it leaves a tear in the fabric of the place you left.
Too many people have died now, pushed on the door, swallowed the void enough until it killed them. Poison for oxygen, words clogged around the organs, vital, valiant, doing all they can to strive to be alive. And then the mind came, said, life is a game show and you have lost. This atomic bomb of thought, this Chernobyl plane rolled out for you to breed, kills all thoughts that would rise from other parts. No wren for the mother in the heart, no liver sigh for what the father felt, or blood flow through vein for the sibling who stands alone where you once stood, and numb blocks out the childhood games and laughs and pinches in the dark and fights and anything that would bring you into the light, because the very thought that you could be present on or not is enough to side them down.
If you do not have a mother or a father or a brother or a sister or an auntie or an uncle or a friend, know too, this is not about other people and how they care for you, not about the ripple of doom shockwaves sent out as you violently cross the threshold.
Although being no doubt, voids create, and who knows what your death would birth. What terrible nothing.
This void is a thing that was born from the creation of empty space and hollow words. They only ever existed to sell you something that does not exist.
You don't need me to tell you humans are creative. We build things, machines and structures, rules and hierarchies, societies, communities, and then we start to measure worth by who we are in these, and all ways which we comparatively contextualize, minimalize ourselves.
Are you inhaling this? The noxious gas with every word and image that sharps into view to say it isn't worthwhile being you. No passerby would clock behind your smile the knowledge that there is something you can't get past, and you're not sure that you will last.
The sea turns silver and green. Your breath draws in salt air. The breeze is there and not. Grass grows, bends to your touch. Soul on earth. Soul on earth.
Stand in the world for a moment, as is. You know, the breeze through leaves, a shade of shadow on the moon.
Two birds, a wind buffeted sky, we are part of that. You and I.
Deep and sense-filled the world is, colour and pigment, sorrow and joy.
How to bear such sadness when it hits you. How to speak through clamps that squeeze you.
How to allow the mind to recede, stay alive in a body and reseed.
How to replant yourself on this earth and know you will be tended, you will grow.
But how? But how?
This is not something that has happened to you alone. Many have pressed up against this solid void and held it close before they spoke, and railed and rallied and shunned the void, and held tight to beauty in the smallest sense. Self-conscious vision, half embarrassed, hearing a blackbird sing.
Noting the colour of yellow on a lemon skin, the drops of rain, jewel turned in sun, making webs once hid illuminate.
These are small things you would not conceive to hate, and yet, perhaps somewhere, once or more times than that, you felt small and in hate crept, pushing you in steps to doors in the void, and here you find yourself, eye blocked up by door unseen, as if you've reached the end of how you can dream.
This is when you must scream and shout. Take off the silent shroud that says you must not speak too loud about these doors that stand hard stone.
If you have the great fortune to have a cloud pass overhead, look at it instead. If you chance to be standing on solid ground, feel the weight beneath your feet. These are magnets for your soul. A sense of presence and the lure of absence will screech back. All you have is lack. All you bring is naught. When you go, your body will not be sought. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the feeling is mutual. Don't let the trick of nothing pull you out of real living.
Turn, put the void at your back, and while its rage will be deafening, it will not stop you noticing.
There is a dearth of this way of seeing, but there is much to be seen.
We are rare things of beauty, individualized holders of glory, pulling out the threads within to make a story of how we walk on earth. Keep walking.
I'm Juliet Riddell and I directed it thanks to Stephen, who asked me to direct it because we'd done this film together before, and I was just really honoured to be able to work on this film, and written so brilliantly by Clare.
Hi. Are we just like freestyling? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'm Clare, and I wrote it because Stephen asked me to, and I mean...
Well, it's something that you wanted to write,
It was something I
wasn't
wanted
it?
to
It
write,
wasn't
yeah.
like I didn't say,
No.
come on and we'll do something
No.
about suicide.
No, Stephen said, would you write something for the 40th anniversary? Because we'd worked together before, obviously, first of all, on a field day play that we put on, that we were here exactly 9 years ago, actually, Stephen, on this very day.
Were we?
Yeah, we were rehearsing it because we had a play on at the Playhouse 9 years ago. And then we did Hard Border, which Juliet commissioned me to write, and then Stephen was in for the Financial Times. And then cut to 2019, and Stephen said 2020 was the anniversary, so could I write something poetic for then? And then we would put it out in 2020. But little did we know that wasn't going to happen. And that's why we're sitting here near the end of 2021 doing it. So, but anyway, it was something that I wanted to write because, you know, for obvious reasons, too many people have died, and it's something I feel really strongly about. I don't think anybody couldn't, but, you know, we were chatting before we came here. Somebody was asking me about, you know, the motivation behind it, and I said that I remembered reading an article in the New Yorker magazine years ago that really stuck in my head, and it was interviews with people who had tried to take their own life but hadn't been successful. And one man said that he survived miraculously jumping off a bridge, and he was like really determined that he nothing would have stopped him doing it. But the second that his foot left the bridge, he didn't want to die. And he said, you know, he was a really, really lucky, but so many people must have felt like that. And I know it's a topic which is huge in Derry and really painful for everybody who lives here. So for Stephen as well, it was very important that we filmed here, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, very much so, yeah. But I mean, even today I saw some activity around on the river, and the people who are trying to help people, you know. So it's obviously it's terrible everywhere, but it's pretty bad in this town. And I have no idea what you do about it, really.
Well, I suppose one of the reasons why, it might sound too grand, and I don't want it to sound grand because I feel like if it helps one person, then this will be a great success for us. But it's the idea, I suppose, that everybody has a voice in their head which is negative, and for some people that can really take over. And we were sort of thinking about this film as voices that weren't like that. So if you watch a film, it's like you're listening to those voices, and if they plant a seed inside your subconscious somehow, then maybe those will be the words that will come up if you feel any sort of despair.
Well, one of the things that was interesting about it from my perspective was because of that, there is something almost subliminal about the poem, and not all the lines land immediately, and it is something that sort of gets into your head. And I've watched it so many times, and now I hear lines differently, but you never really... One of the interesting things you said to me at the beginning was that it's not that you have to hear everything, it just has to somehow sink in. So I really thought about that in terms of how you kind of created that space in a head. But I also wanted to honour the fact that it was from a company that's heritage is in theatre, so it isn't coincidence that we filmed it in the Playhouse and that it does feel theatrical, but that there was something interesting about a piece that you don't have to sort of hear immediately. And that's how you wrote it, right?
I suppose that is what I love about poetry, because it can wash over you, and then something like just pings at some point, which is the technical poetic term that all academics use. Ping.
And all the actors, because they were a funny combination, weren't they, between, and I don't know how you felt, Stephen, reading it, because there was a sort of funny place between acting and reading, wasn't there, in terms of whether the voices were characters or whether they weren't, and how we sort of placed them in that funny, slightly middle ground between the two, because we didn't want the characters to overwhelm the words.
No, I thought we were kind of ourselves, you know, and the closer it was to ourselves, the better, really. You know, maybe that's not true.
I think so, yeah, but we thought about that, I suppose, in the casting, of the fact that you were different people and came from different backgrounds.
And there was, you know, I mean, there were things like we wanted to have a diverse sound as well, didn't we? We wanted to have Dublin and Northern and...
Because it is something that affects anybody, so I suppose you didn't want to have, you know, 4 actors who looked similar or came from similar experiences.
But also there was a sense that they are also, even though they were different voices, but in some senses they were also the same voice, and the way that they sort of leave off from each other and speak to each other was also really important.
And also, I suppose, in terms of Field Day, that Field Day has a history of pamphlet making, and it was sort of like a visual pamphlet, wasn't it? That's kind of what we were thinking at the beginning.
Yeah, and of course Seamus created the pamphlet idea, so that's for him tonight as well. Yeah.
And then I felt that Stephen liked Hard Border. Maybe I felt that what you liked about it partly was because it was very rooted in a real place. And so to use, to make sure that Derry itself was so important to the visual language of the film. And I had an amazing day out on the river with the Foyle Search and Rescue, understanding about the situation here, and going out on the river was hugely informative, and that's why, you know, the river really had to be part of it. But I wanted to be sensitive to not sort of glorify the river or how to approach the river sensitively, but it was impossible to make a film here without the river being visually very present. Do you think we should ask if anyone has any questions? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, do you want to ask any questions? Or?
How did you decide who was going to speak which parts? Did the characters themselves take the lines? Were they attracted to the lines? Or was it something, how did you work that through?
That's a good question. I think when I was writing it, I had an idea I definitely knew initially which voice Stephen was going to be, because he was the voice of hope, which obviously is, you symbolise, hopeful. But it was sort of that the poetic, the slower poeticism, and I love how Stephen, don't tell him, but I love how he says, you know, how he speaks the language and just understands it, and also appears not to be doing anything with it, but does everything with it. And so the one of the voices was the kind of thread of hope that talked about nature and everything. And I knew right at the beginning when I was writing it that I wanted Stephen to do that. And then the other 3 voices were, it could have been any really, couldn't it? Like the other 3 actors could have taken them. And then amazingly, like they all brought their own brilliance to it. Like it was amazing for me to be able to see what they did with the words then that were like the raw material. I don't know if that answers the question properly, but yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, okay.
No, oh yeah.
Can we say what we found very powerful?
Absolutely.
I think it was really great how you concentrated on this one lane, and then how the camera really goes into the wall. But I have a question too. How do you want to reach the audience that film is relevant for?
Well, do you want to answer first and then I'll answer?
Well, I mean, because it was a poem rather than a script, I suppose I was keen to make sure there was still a kind of narrative, and there was a thrust, and there was a propulsion through the film. And so quite early on I had this feeling that we had to be on a journey of somebody going through the city, and the idea of heading to the river. And then by spending this day here in Derry, the director of photography, Philip, and I were amazed at how many places there were that went between light and dark, and how many alleys there were, and we just kept seeing, and also the fences. And I'm from London, I'm not from here, and I was sort of struck by the history of the city with the wall, and there's these blocks, and then there's these lights that open up, and there's these windows. And then we have the Fountain Estate with the fencing, and you kind of go past it, and it sort of judges between the sort of the dark and the light. And suddenly all around us, we kept seeing this kind of interplay between light and dark. And then also in the walls, it was striking seeing these sort of moments of these trees and the sort of nature coming through the concrete. And so also the interplay between the sort of the physicality of the city, but also the interplay of nature. So this kind of light and dark, and that was so present in Clare's poem. And she kept talking about walls and void, and I just really felt that very physically. And then the idea of having the actors stand in a square was really important to me, because at first it's like, well, how are they going to stand? Are they in the room together, or are they standing in a line? And because Clare had been influenced by Beckett, I started to look at Beckett's work, and he created this amazing film where these four sort of characters move around in a square, and it just felt
very
really
strange,
right.
Very strange.
Very strange film, but I loved it. And so yes, that interplay between dark and light and void is sort of central to how the piece was created.
And then you were asking the second part of how we would hope to get it to people who needed to hear it. And I suppose my feeling is that, not in a sort of egomaniacal way that everybody needs to hear it, like the whole world, but just more like, I think many people experience feelings of despair, or even if you don't go to the extent of wanting to end your own life, feeling that you aren't worth full, or, and I think my feeling, which again we were talking about earlier, was, if you can possibly get it out to as many people as possible, the hope is that just it would help one person. If it helps one person, then that's it. And with all of these things, they're just creative arrows that you just shoot out. And, we did everything that we could, and, maybe a few thousand people have seen it so far, but it isn't time dependent. So you just hope that people share it, and as many people as possible, pass it on to as many people as possible. And I suppose that's one of the benefits of the social world, media type world that we live in, even though it has so many negatives, that you just hope, it reaches as wide an audience as possible. And in a way, we can't really control that. You just have to hope.
Where is it available?
It's online, so it's RTE launched it on their platform on World Suicide Prevention Day, which was in September.
You can find it on YouTube, actually, if you put in Stay Alive into YouTube. Thank you.